say for everybody that's here tonight, a free dinner on Rob. Yeah, just go ahead and say Rob Portman sent you. I want to thank Anthony Munoz for being here. Where's Anthony? I appreciate your being here. Thank you. We put together an all-star team, and I appreciate his help. Thank you so much. I want to thank also Steve Shevin for being here. He's a great congressman. You got to make sure to re-elect him, right? Get that done. And thank you to Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor. She's been introducing me across the state of Ohio. And interestingly, we keep getting larger and larger crowds, and she's done it again. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate your help. Now, about a week ago, I had a debate, and I did enjoy myself. It was a great opportunity for the president and for me, for both of us to talk about our respective points of view. We had a chance to talk about substance. You know, sometimes in debates the moderators are jumping in and asking questions to try and get you off track, but this moderator let us speak about issues that people care about. People heard both of what we had to say. It was a very helpful opportunity, and I got to ask the president some questions that I know people across the country have wanted to have asked. I asked him, for instance, why would 23 million Americans out of work or struggling to find a good job, that he spent his first 2 years trying to put an Obamacare that kills jobs. I got the chance to ask him why with gasoline prices twice as high as when he took office, he cut the number of permits and licenses to drill for oil and gas on federal lands and in federal waters in half.
Keystone Pipeline.
I got to ask, for instance, you know, with trillion-dollar deficits, with us borrowing money from people like the Chinese, how in the world you could spend $90 billion? $90 billion, which would have hired 2 million teachers. How he spent $90 billion instead investing in solar companies and green companies. By the way, he likes picking winners and losers, or as a friend said to me, no, he just likes picking losers. And so the president gave his answers, or his lack of answers, as the case may be. I thought in some respects he explained himself best a couple of weeks ago when he said, you know, you can't fix Washington from the inside, you can only fix it from the outside. Well, we're going to give him that chance on November 6th. And there are other questions I'd like to ask, of course. I'd like to ask why we've gone from 32 million people on food stamps, and over the last 4 years now up to 47 million on food stamps. That's an increase of 15 million people.
By design.
More than the population of Ohio. How has that happened? And of course, what he wants to talk about, instead of these people on food stamps, instead of the fact that half the kids coming out of college can't find work, or college-level work. Now that 1 out of 6 Americans is living in poverty, what he wants to talk about is how we can save Big Bird. What I want to talk about is how I can help save the American family and get good jobs for the American people. And so I've had the chance over this last week to go all over Ohio, from place to place, and meet folks, and his campaign keeps getting smaller and smaller as he talks about Big Bird and so forth, and our crowds keep getting bigger and bigger. There's more of a crescendo and passion. Now, we do agree that this is a critical choice for America. And the question is going to be raised for the middle class of America, who can help you more? The president has his plan, and the path he'd take us. I have my plan, the path I would take us. How I'd get good jobs and higher take-home pay for middle-income Americans. And I want you to take a look at them both. The president, if he were to get re-elected, there's no question but that he'd raise taxes. The vice president blurted out the truth a couple weeks ago. He said, yeah, we're going to raise taxes by $1 trillion. I don't think anyone believes that raising taxes on small business and the American people will create more jobs. I can make this commitment to you. I will not raise taxes on middle-class Americans, and I will not raise taxes on small business. If he were to get re-elected, there's no question he's going to fully install Obamacare. If I get elected, and by the way, That means that your premiums are going to go up $2,500 a year, that there'll be an unelected board that ultimately tells you what kind of treatments you can have and can't have to get reimbursed. You're going to have people who lose their insurance. Up to 20 million people who have insurance now are going to lose it. Employers are dropping people from full-time jobs and putting them into part-time jobs, in part because of Obamacare. If I get elected president, we're going to repeal Obamacare and put in place real reforms.
When you get elected president.
If this president gets re-elected, well, I think he's made it very clear that he's in favor of hundreds of billions of dollars of cuts to our military. And with the sequester, the White House authored as well, why there isn't hundreds of millions on top of that, for roughly $1 trillion in cuts to our military. That doesn't just cost jobs. That threatens our national security. The Secretary of Defense said those cuts would be devastating. I can tell you this, when I get elected president, cut our military budget. Our military must remain the strongest military in the world. One of the biggest differences between the two of us relates to jobs, rising take-home pay. I mean, with 23 million Americans out of work and struggling to find a good job, with the median income in America having gone down each of the last 4 years, down now $4,300 a family. At the same time, gasoline prices up, food prices up, utility prices up, healthcare costs up. Look, this has been a tough time for middle-income Americans. The Vice President said middle-income Americans have been buried. He's right. And against that backdrop, when the President's asked, what are you going to do to help people get jobs? Well, he has nothing new to say. It's another stimulus. How'd the last one work out? You know, and then he wants to hire more government workers. Nothing wrong with government workers, but that's not going to put America back to work. And then, of course, he wants to make his investments in various businesses and so forth, and then he wants to raise taxes. He does not have a plan that will get America working. Paul Ryan and I have a plan that's going to get America to create 12 million jobs in 4 years. And you've heard them, but I'm going to tell you again because I want you to remember. There are 5 things we're going to do that are going to get this economy going again, roaring again. America's economy is going to come back strong. We're going to get take-home pay up and jobs growing again. Get our kids coming out of college and high school able to get good jobs. We've got 5 things. Number 1, we're going to take full advantage of our oil, our coal, our gas. I'm going to double the number of permits on federal lands and in federal waters, and I'm going to make sure our regulators don't close off the capacity for us to use our coal and to mine our coal. And I'm also going to make sure we drill offshore and up there in Alaska and pipeline from Canada as well for our oil. The second part of our plan, we're going to make sure we open up more trade. We're going to make more markets available for our manufacturers and for our service providers so we can go into other countries and sell goods around the world. But we're also going to do this. We're going to make sure that when people cheat, and China's been cheating, we're not going to let it go on. This president, on Friday, the administration was to put out the answer to the question, has China manipulated their currency or not? And they were supposed to designate that on Friday. They came out and they said, well, we're not going to do that, actually. We're going to wait until after the election to have that. See, they've gone 7 times so far and they just passed the buck on that. I'm not going to just pass that off. On day 1, I will label China a currency manipulator. We're going to get serious about making sure people... So number 1 is energy, and number 2 is trade, and number 3, I want to make sure our people have the skills they need to be able to work in the jobs of today. So all these federal training programs, of which there are 47, I'm going to take the money from those, send Ohio back its fair share, and make sure Ohio people have the training they need for Ohio jobs. And for the skills of tomorrow, we've got to make sure our schools are the best in the world. How in the world the nation that invented public education can have schools performing in the bottom third or bottom quartile in math and science is beyond me. In my view, it's time for us to make sure we put our kids and their parents and the teachers first, and the teachers union is going to have to go behind. Number four, you're not going to get entrepreneurs to take the risk that Senator Portman's grandfather took in borrowing $2,000 and restoring that building. You're not going to get entrepreneurs to take their life savings and put it into a new business, or big companies to come and build new factories and put people to work unless they know we're not on the road to Greece. And if this president keeps on spending $1 trillion more than we take in, that's the road we're on. And so I'm going to do something very different than he would. Number four for me is we're going to cut federal spending, we're going to cap federal spending, and finally get us on track to a balanced budget. We want to champion small business. We're going to help small business grow. That means keep their taxes down, get regulations to work for small business, get rid of Obamacare and scaring jobs away. I'm going to help small business. We do those 5 things, and jobs are going to come back in this country. I'm confident that our future is bright. It's not just the 12 million jobs I'm thinking about. It's our kids and their future. I know that the people who are standing here tonight, who stood here a long time to join us in this rally, you didn't come here just because of me, or even because of our party or conservatism. You came because you're concerned about America. It's always been a characteristic of this great country to know that the future is brighter than the past. To know that we're passing on to our kids a land more free and more prosperous even than that which we enjoyed. And that's coming back. That confidence is coming back. I was so saddened to see that the majority of Americans, for the first time in history, think the future is more bleak, not better. We can change that. Because what's in here, the heart of the American people is strong. The heart of the American people has been proven time and time again in test after test. Regardless of the challenge, we stand and overcome those challenges. I know it's true. I've seen it. I've seen people in the most extreme circumstances who dig deep, show that kind of courage. The great qualities of the human spirit I see in my fellow Americans, day in and day out. I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago for a big event, and I saw kind of an opening in the crowd. And as I went along shaking hands, I realized that was because someone there was in a wheelchair, a big one of these motorized wheelchairs. And I sort of pushed the people aside to see who it was. Turned out it was a classmate of mine from graduate school. And he'd been involved in an automobile accident. I think it was an automobile accident. And he was made quadriplegic. He was a very successful business person. And instead of throwing in the towel and becoming despondent, he kept involved in his business. He became active in raising money and working with a center for spinal cord injury research to make sure that other people would not suffer what he suffered. I saw the character of Billy Hulse as I saw him that day, and he moved his chair up, motorized it up next to me, and I put my hand on his shoulder. I hadn't seen him for a little while. I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "God bless you, Billy, and I love you." The next day, I heard he passed away. Aww. It's rare you get the chance to say to someone what you care about, what you really feel. I love this country. I love the people of this country. I was at the Republican convention a few weeks ago, as you know, in Tampa, and I met a wonderful woman named Jane Horton. She was packing a box of birthday presents and food and so forth to send to her husband in Afghanistan, who's a sharpshooter there, when the knock came at the door. Tell her that he'd been killed. And instead of her becoming depressed, she went to work to try and help other families who'd lost loved ones. And on the day of the funeral, by the way, of her husband, she was dismayed, I'm sure, to see that there was a protest funeral. Remember this, where there were some of these people that were protesting funerals, some misguided souls. And she was asked, what do you think about these protesters? And her answer says something about the American heart. She said, Chris gave his life so people like that can protest. This is the American spirit. This is the greatness of this nation and the people of this nation. One more experience which has touched me in my heart, one I won't forget. I was at a Boy Scout Court of Honor. And a Court of Honor is where Boy Scouts get their Eagle Award or get other awards. And I was in the Boy Scout program at the time, so I was up in the front of the room, and he had this big Formica table. I was sitting down at the end of the table next to the flagpole. And the person who was speaking was the Scoutmaster from Monument, Colorado. And he was telling quite a story. He said that the Boy Scouts in his troop had wanted to have a very special American flag. So they bought one with gold tassels around the outside, and then they had it flown, I believe, over the state capitol and also in the capital of Washington, D.C. When it came home, the boys said, now we want it to go up with the space shuttle. And so they contacted NASA and said, we'd like our flag to go on the space shuttle. And you know, space is at a premium in space, you know. And yet NASA agreed. He said, okay, we'll take your flag with us. And as you can imagine, he said the boys were so proud, looking from their home rooms at school, watching the space shuttle launch, watching the rocket go up in the air, knowing that their flag was on that space shuttle, and then they saw it explode on the TV screen. And he said he called NASA about 2 weeks later and asked them had they found any remnant of their flag, and they said no. And every week, for several months, he called and called. Have you found anything? Have you found any part of our flag? No, they haven't. No, they haven't. About September, he said he was looking at an article in the newspaper, and it talked about the debris that had been found at the Challenger disaster. And as they're going down, he saw something about a flag. And so he called NASA again, and sure enough, they had found something they wanted to present to him. So we got the Boy Scouts together, and NASA came and made a presentation, and it was a container, a plastic container. He said, we opened up the container, and there was our flag in perfect condition.
Oh, wow.
And then he said, and it's on the flagpole there next to Mr. Romney at the end of the table. And I reached over and put my hand on the flag and pulled it out. And it was as if electricity was running through my arm. Because I thought about those NASA astronauts, pioneers, who lived for something bigger than themselves, who put themselves in harm's way so that we could learn, pioneering new avenues of learning, understanding space in ways that might help their fellow Americans and fellow men and women. That's the nature of the American people. We live for something bigger than ourselves. We look for opportunities to serve in our community, our school, our faith, our family. That American spirit I see in the dads and moms who are working 2 jobs these days, working 2 jobs so they can afford to give their kids the clothes they need so they don't stand out at school. I think of the single moms who are scrimping and saving to put food on the table, particularly at the end of the pay period. I think of the kids coming out of high school and college who put aside their career and say, I'm going to sign up for the military because my country needs me right now. I think of the moms and dads who at Christmas time decide not to exchange gifts so they can instead afford a great Christmas for their children. But this is America. This is who we are. This is why at a time like this we come together. We face extraordinary challenges around the world and here. So many people out of work, so much debt, so many people in turmoil around the world. This is a time for America to have leadership that will help guide us together again, that will call on the greatness of the American spirit, that will do what it takes to restore the strength of our homes and our values, that knows how to rebuild an economy, that keep a military their sacrifice. I was Memorial Day. I was in San Diego, a great military town, the Marines and members of the Navy, and I was on a platform speaking, and there were several veterans with me from the Second World War, one of who was closest to me, said that he was the lookout on the USS Tennessee when the day of Pearl Harbor arrived, and he looked out and saw the pilot coming in to drop armament on their ships. He said he locked eyes with that pilot, and the blasts injured him. He went on to serve for 33 years in the U.S. Navy. We applauded him as we recognized his sacrifice for our country. I think of that wonderful American hymn, America the Beautiful, that verse that says, "Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country love, and mercy more than life." For our members of our armed services, past and current, please raise your hand and be recognized. Opportunity. I make this commitment to you. When Paul, Ryan, and I get elected, we're going to do everything we can to keep this country strong, with a strong military and a strong economy and values that hold back to the very principles that made this country the nation it is. I love America. I believe in America. I believe in you. I believe we're coming back. But I need your help as well. I need you to vote. I need you to get other people who voted for Barack Obama to come join our team. We need